Welcome to another episode of The Bill Chun Show. This episode is very important to me for a few reasons. For over 3 decades now, I've been working as an OBGYN. I've had many encounters with patients and their families. I certainly cannot remember them all, but I can recall very memorable moments, like a few deaths I was part of, to difficult surgeries, to amazing birth. And perhaps because I've been doing this too long, I've gotten complacent and just set in my ways, and that the way I practice medicine is the right way, it's the correct way for everyone. Until recently, until I met my guest for tonight a few weeks ago. And for sure, she will forever be imprinted in my mind, the way I think, the way I approach the subject that we're about to talk about. For sure, we know that our healthcare system, we treat Black women differently. I knew that. And in my mind, starting from my training at Boston City Hospital, I thought I knew how to approach women of all color. And perhaps the way I treated my patients, for the most part, was good enough for most of my patients. And maybe for some of them it wasn't, but none of them expressed to me that I was in the wrong until I met May. And in the beginning, and I'm going to explain to you as to what had happened between May and me, but in the beginning, when I received May's reaction, it took me a while to understand, what did I do wrong? Then I realized at some point that I was always coming from my point of view, my experience, never from hers. So I invited May to come onto this program as a proud daughter of Nigerians and as a hardworking computer tech, proud African American woman that she is. I still need her to teach me more. And before I get to May, I'm going to give you an example as to how wrong we are when it comes to healthcare for Black women. 36-year-old young mother with 2 master's degrees, PhD in dual subject, working as an epidemiologist, working at Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, died of hypertension-related pregnancy complication just 3 weeks after giving birth to a daughter in Atlanta. This is an embarrassing example where no amount of education and no amount of money can protect Black women. And I thought I was on the right side. I thought I was one of the right ones. But after my experience with May, I still have room for improvement. And I want to hear from May, from her childhood in Georgia to her adult life in Massachusetts. I want to hear from her how she got to be where she is. So let me bring on May, and we'll hear from her. Hey,
Hello, Bill.
how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
So that's what you look like without the mask. Well, thank you for joining me tonight. And I don't know if you got to hear my introduction, but I was saying that our encounter all three visits, especially the last one, actually shook me enough that I had to talk to a few of my friends, just talk it out as to what had happened, why is this happening, and then it took me a while, but I got to that point where, you know what, I got to have May on because I get it, and tonight is about you. I'm going to be mostly listening. I just want to hear the stuff you sent me on my phone, starting from the beginning. Just take us through as to where you were and where you are now. And I think that helps us explaining why just for a young person like you, how important it is that every encounter with healthcare professional, however little that encounter may be, it has to be a positive experience. And just talking about women's health or maternal mortality rate in this country, how is it possible that black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die compared to their counterpart in this country in 2020? So I want to briefly tell listeners how we met. We met a few months ago when you came to me for a procedure and it needed little doing. And the way I approached it was, if you don't mind, do you mind if I give more details about the procedure?
Not at all.
Not at all. So you came to me for an IUD or intrauterine device, a contraceptive device that's placed in the uterus, and I was to remove it. It was difficult because I could not see the strings. We ended up doing it with an ultrasound guided method, and at the end, I was able to remove it. During the procedure, you were doing very well, but I didn't say very well. I said, May, you are tough. And then reaction from you was that, is it because you are black woman? And I have to say, initially, I was shaken because of all the people, not Chan. I mean, heck, this is what I do. But it took me few talking with my friends, including my daughter, to understand that I was always seeing it from my point of view, never yours. And when I did that, it made sense. But if someone like me, need to be taught, imagine many others in American healthcare system, how much room we have for improvement. So I just want to, for you to come on, educate me, educate the listener is what tonight is all about. And I'll be listening. So take us through from the beginning, wherever you want to.
Bill, thank you. Um, so I just want to say I'm still learning too. I run into issues where I have to kind of revise my behavior just because I'm in interrelation. I'm so sorry. I've got an echo.
That's okay. Can
I'm
you?
in a relationship with a white man, and he doesn't always see the issues that I see. And
I'm sorry, Meg. Are you speaking to on a mic? I'm having a hard time hearing. Let me see.
I, one moment, please.
Okay. Oh, there she is. Okay.
Hey, Bill, can you hear me?
Oh, much better. Thank you. Okay. Go ahead.
Awesome. I apologize for that.
No. I'm going to see.
So there is a continued echo, but I'm going to just kind of, I guess, run through how things went from my perspective.
Sure.
Um, so those first few visits were super tough. They were definitely painful. I was um, dreading them. I knew that I had to do something about the condition that I was in, but I really didn't want to. Um, but, you know, I feel like many people are wary of the hospital anyway. I feel like that's normal. Um, but knowing that there's history behind just the origins of gynecology, and it's actually something I found out recently. I only became more aware of a few histories concerning Black Americans after George Floyd and all the events around that. Um, that was definitely a scary time for me because it felt like it felt like at that time that we were constantly seeing these race relation issues in the news, and it was always a spiral downward. Um, so I really only educated myself that recently on things like this, and I'm trying to just being where I was when all this happened. I was trying to be proactive. I wasn't trying to be like malicious, I guess. Um, but I definitely acted out the last time I saw you. Let me let me backtrack. Um, I felt like I kept hearing that I was strong, that I was doing so good against the pain, and I felt like I was being paired with pain so naturally, and that didn't feel so comfortable when I was especially in pain on the table, bleeding, sweating, shaking, etc. Um, I wasn't scared, but it was definitely unbearable. Uh, Tylenol can only do so much when something's being pulled out of you. And so I wanted to be careful with my health if I was going to approach it seriously, because otherwise I will keep away from the hospital at all costs. Doesn't matter what it's for. I can't stand the hospitals. Um, but yeah, being in a space where I felt like it's hard to talk about this stuff anyway.
Hmm.
Um, I felt like it was kind of my duty to talk about things concerning racism. Um, I don't think anyone in the room was trying to be racist, and I feel like that's a position of a lot of really just Americans today. Looking back at the election, we saw a lot of people voted for voted for Trump for one reason or another, but the bottom line we always see around that is that racism is not like it's not a deal breaker. Um, and that's because it's normalized. That's because it's normal in spaces where it really cannot be talked about, in spaces where it's going to be faced by everyone that's able to face it, and then there won't be any room for revision. You, a doctor, have seen situations where you're being just prejudged, um, evaluated before you're known at all. And so those environments I've seen are hospitals where patients can really get away with saying things like, oh no, I want a white doctor. Oh no, I want this, I want that. They can be very, very specific, and it's sensitive because it's life or death or just plain health. There's also the corporate environment. If there's any big earth shaking event for someone that's someone that's not important or high up in the company, what we'll see is these events that make some people feel unsafe go totally ignored in a workspace that's trying to promote mental health and self-care. they really, in corporate spaces, will make sure to just bypass issues specific to social relations, race relations. And these are the spaces that they can't be revived in. And these are the spaces that we need to speak in about racism the most. Um, Wherever we put our comfort around it first, that's where we fail to see the dimensions of it. Because racism is very uncomfortable for everyone involved. Um, but just being recent to all this information, being recent to some American history, just detailing its weird atrocities and weird Jim Crow eras, all of that, it's like we have to learn now what our culture is going to be later. Like we have to create it from scratch. It has to be us weeding out those behaviors, those social practices that are obsolete. Um, and that's going to be interpersonal work. That's
Mm-hmm.
going to be trying to confront it when it happens, but also leaving space for change. Um, and I think we were able to do that. And that's why I'm really glad to be able to speak on it. I was really flustered when I came back and I was like, you know what, guys? I don't want to be here anymore. I'm getting a new doctor. This isn't working out. Um, you came in and we did get to talk it through. We did get to, you know, each say our piece and each say all of the relevant parts that we thought related to the situation.
Mm-hmm.
I know that sounds funny, but when we over explain and we get to lay everything out on the table so we can both see what we were both thinking, the intentions behind our actions, once that's all clear, it's easy to it's easy to look beyond the mistakes. It's easy to see it with a better understanding. Um, and thank you for taking the time to do that again. Um, I know that you also have the experience of being an immigrant. Um, so I always wondered around that. I did hear your first podcast on your Ugandan friend. I don't remember her name, but I thought that was a very interesting connection that you guys had. Um, and I thought that it would also give us both very different outlooks on the world. Uh, and I feel like people today have to be a little bit more greedy, more outspoken, more selfish. And these all sound really, really terrible, but uh, people just have to be more honest with themselves. And that means, to me, speaking your mind at all times, um, even when it's hard. So let me see.
If I may say something right there, not you as black woman, but if patients, regardless of the gender and race, saw themselves as consumer and really demanded quality, then we'll have better health care. People don't speak up.
Indeed.
People do not speak up. And because of that, I think, literally the current healthcare is the way it is. And what you are doing, just by you starting the conversation with me, led to my conversation with a few others, and which is why we are here. It's important to talk about this and do something about it so that starting with you, every encounter is positive and productive. how else do we change or reverse the current trend? I mean, I started in the beginning of the podcast. I mentioned that her the first name is spelled Shalon, and that's a word. There's a word for Nigerian, and it's pronounced many different ways. Her last name is Irving, but 36-year-old woman with 3 advanced degrees, works for CDC. Her project was disparities in healthcare. How is that she dies from pregnancy-related matter 3 weeks after giving birth? I don't know what else she was supposed to do when she expressed to her doctor that she was having problems, why she was not seen in an ER, in an ambulatory care center, how she was found dead in her kitchen. I don't know what else she was supposed to do. So the point is, there are many others, so you represent many who are not going to speak up because you have to speak up. If you didn't speak up with me, then you wouldn't be on this program. It is important that we speak up and try to make change. And another point I was trying to make is that I thought, having done this for a long time, I must not have any bad habits. Little did I know, I still have room for improvement. Because on one hand, I think most of my patients are positive about my practice, but I want to say most isn't good enough for me. I need every one of you to come to me and have positive experience, because it's that one patient who I did not meet the need, is that one patient is going to bother me. So I like to think that this whole relationship is very productive. And when I read your the content you sent me, I actually was struck by. I was thinking just the opposite, because when I think about, I say as non-white, I would never drive through Georgia because if I get stopped, I may not survive. But what you told me was just the opposite, in that when you were growing up in Georgia, you lived in desegregated environment, and the race was never an issue for me in the area you lived. And you come to Stoneham, just outside of Boston, it becomes an issue. So I found that to be I was surprised by that part of your content. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
So Georgia was definitely my little utopia as far as I remember. My family was pretty big, but we were able to, well, my parents built a house in Georgia and we all moved down there, and it was just a different culture. It was a different subculture, I guess I could call it. We all know the South for being racist and this, that, and the third, and having all this lynch history, all the scary stuff. But that's not what the experience was for me, as you said. Um, I, it could have been my own ignorance as a child as well. I do understand that I was in elementary school and in that sort of grade range, but it was a very diverse crowd. I know that there were a lot of Hispanic kids, there were a lot of white kids, and a lot of Asian kids, and plenty of black kids, especially in my neighborhood. And that wasn't just like black people, that was a lot of immigrants. Um, so yeah, the one situation I do remember having to do with race was on the bus ride home. So my brother and the bus driver's son would sit together every day and play on their Game Boys right behind her. And one day out of nowhere, the bus driver's son, Luke, says to my brother, "You can't sit with me because you're black. You can't watch. You have to sit over there." And he's telling him what to do, all this stuff. The bus driver hears this and she brings the bus to a screeching halt in the middle of the road. And we see cars going around us. She turns around right there and disciplines her son, yelling and pulling his ear, all of the above. And everybody was shocked because she was this sweet old lady, and you'd never even imagine. But I distinctly remember her saying that her family is not racist, this, that, this, like really laying it on him. I was so surprised. Um, but yeah, that was the people's attitude around racism, as far as I remember. Um, Everyone was so close knit, and this was of the time before smartphones. Everybody just kind of knew everybody's business, but at the same time, no one ever, or at least I never, felt alone. Um, Everyone was always literally together or outside or swimming, doing some kind of sport. It was a very sports oriented environment. My brother was already being trained for football, basketball. It was also the time that I had the most freedom in my life. My parents were getting a divorce, but that meant they were never home or they were never together. And all eight of me and my siblings had all the freedom in the world to go to anybody's house, to go to anybody's party. Every weekend there was a block party. There was just so much community activity. Um, there was some weird sort of safety in that. Uh, I only highlight that because I feel like that's the kind of activity it would take for a lot of our country to heal the social atrocities done to not just Black people, done to Asian people, done to the Native Americans, done to everybody in between. They often go unaddressed. Um, I personally see them as open sores, like any space where the people of one country have some kind of disconnection for no real logical reason. I think that the community involvement is what it takes. It takes people on the ground, it takes people in their own local spaces to make significant change. And that being said, I feel like a lot of the media convinces a lot of us that the world's just full of bad people and bad things. And I know that's not the whole story either. I'm only such a patriot of this country because I feel that it has a lot of potential. Um, yeah. And then coming to the Stoneham area, 15 minutes north of Boston, it's it was an ugly situation. Um, I felt it wasn't that all the time, but so often and so normal was it to hear something about my features or to hear that my sister or brother had a very bad day because someone said this or that to them or something having to do with race like that. And a lot of the times you just kind of have to suck it up and keep it moving because it doesn't make sense to give that time when it's not giving you anything back, right? Um, so there was a lot of that in high school, in middle school, in Stoneham. Um, I had a friend tell me that we could not be around each other anymore because I was Black and that was causing her too many issues in our social spaces. She said that people wouldn't talk to her after they saw that we were friends, something along those lines. Of course, it was many years ago, but that was someone's reason for telling me that we couldn't be friends within my lifespan. Like, this stuff isn't ancient. Someone really thought that was logical and normal and okay. And that's not something I would ever do to anybody, I feel. especially if it's something that's out of their control. The difference between Georgia and Massachusetts was the sense of community, the sense of belonging. I didn't feel like I belonged.
It's interesting because people would think just the opposite, you know? I mean, I say Massachusetts is a fake liberal state because we always pick Republican governor, and I too, having had more than a few racial encounters, and I'm thinking, wow, this is Cambridge. I can see MIT to my left and Harvard to my right. How is this happening? And but it is just the opposite of what I would have envisioned between Georgia and Massachusetts. So growing up like that, you move through high school and college, and you are now in IT world. Somewhere along the line, I think it's part of being an immigrant. I think because you throughout all this, you never you still imply how great this country is because this is where I say glass is half full because we have so much potential. And I don't know, maybe it's just the makeup of my practice, but the more reading I do, I'm just saddened and stunned and embarrassed by where black women stand, especially in obstetrics and gynecology. We have not made any headway for a long time. And it's not just pregnancy, if you look at the number of women who are seeking infertility treatment or research being done on behalf of the conditions which affect black women more like fibroids. I mean, list goes on and on and on. And wow, I've been in Boston for 30 some years and looks like it hasn't changed. We have not made one positive step in 30 some years I've been in Boston. And I think it's people like you and younger generation, others, we just have to keep reminding ourselves what we need to do. And individually, you have to seek better care. I have a colleague who has degrees from Harvard, Stanford, you name it, all the best degrees from undergraduate to medical school to training. And she told me that even for her, she being black woman, she has small circle of friends who they rely on to find different medical care. And I'm saying, what? In Boston? I mean, really? So imagine for those without such circle of friends, without such voice and access, what do they do? And this is a subject that people have to really address because we're talking about 12 to 13% of the population. It's not a small percentage of our nation's population. And the numbers are just awful, god awful. And having had gone to Guatemala once for medical mission, I told a friend of mine, there's no reason for me to go to Guatemala anymore because I can just go to South and serve somebody in a positive way because we are in deep trouble. But, so the burden is on you. You and your friends and your siblings and others have to say, even like now, if you need OBGYN, the dentist, the pediatrician, internal medicine, finding providers who are sensitive to your need is very, very important.
So, yes. And that's kind of the extension of something that's already existing, expanding into medical practice, I think. When you don't feel totally comfortable with any situation, I feel like you're going to be on guard. You're going to watch for red flags. Um, and that was previously in social situations. Most of my life, well, no, not most of my life, just high school and that sort of time and place where I was learning social behavior. I'd watch for red flags. I'd watch for things people would say. I'd watch for behaviors people would do, things people were okay with around them, and go from there. So it's just kind of a lot of reading people and going with your gut feeling and bouncing ideas off of them sometimes. That's not what we did, but in our situation, what what the wording was that triggered me was it was don't make it about race. And I've heard that a few times, and each time I've heard it, I've felt like someone was trying to convince me that I didn't totally understand the situation. Um, and sometimes that's the truth, but sometimes also there's another side to that truth. What I see, what I understand to be previous history and habits that have followed into today, social habits, if I point them out and they have something to do with like a bad practice or something that the person saying it probably had no idea about, if I'm going to show that to them gently without making them feel like a racist or making them feel condemned, um, it's going to feel like an icebreaker every time to just make that happen. Um, I heard that I was strong and I had a great tolerance for pain, like at each of my 3 appointments. And I had asked for that not to be said for my own comfort because I would associate it. I knew I would associate it with Black women being so strong or there being a double standard in empathy or in perceived pain for Black patients. That's, I know, something that attributes to the disparity in care, a lack of empathy. So I don't want any elements making me feel like I've got anyone lacking empathy around me. I wanted the wording to be different. I didn't so much want anyone to feel like they were being racist toward me. I just wanted everyone in the room to know that it was making me uncomfortable because of these things that my mind relates it to. Um, and that's a comfort that you would never imagine because I feel like being a Black woman, I walk around trying to be aware of the history of the way Black women have been treated in this country. And Black is even a blanket term. A I'm a Nigerian. I know I'm Nigerian. I know I'm also American. Growing up, I always said I'm American first and then I'm Nigerian because of cultural differences, because of the extent of the language I understood, because of the things I could do that pertain back to the Nigerian culture that I'm associated with. Um, and yeah, I'm a citizen in both countries, but I still fit into this box of Black woman. So that's what I kind of have to work off. Um, I know that sounds funny, but that's how people will see you, and you just kind of have to preemptively navigate that. And it's a lot like your friend in the previous podcast said, you have to make yourself softer but stern. And that's been a big piece of my recent change as a person in the past few years. It's not so much being stern, but being vocal, being heard, and making sure I'm seen in every way that I can. It's not to be, it's not to ache for attention or be loud about it. It's to make sure that I count each time I speak. Uh, and yeah, that's not something I've normally gotten out of medical care or sometimes in workspaces. Um, where I feel like I can easily be dismissed and it wouldn't be double checked by others around me. Uh, yeah, being stern and being vocal and being loud about our very specific needs as Black women and disregarding the angry Black woman trope. I feel like that only applies to TV characters. In real life, that's not how things go. You really cannot think about the way others will perceive you. You just need to make sure that you're heard. Um, I will be anyone's like angry Black woman friend at the restaurant any day, as long as it means that every single thing I'm saying is being heard and my needs are understood and they're fulfilled. And on top of that, I do work in customer service. I've been in the field of IT for about 8 years. And I feel like my customer base has been a very wide range of people. Um, and that means accommodating each person on an individual scale and perceiving their problems to be problems, even if they're not problems to me. I know that sounds funny, but you just kind of have to take on the world as they see it. You have to be in their shoes. And it's something I think I'm very good at. Um, and I judge other people's customer service where it applies with those same measures. Like if I would consider it for other people, it should also be considered for me. Um, going back to, ugh, going back to,
While you're reading, let me ask you. I mean, I have no doubt in my mind that you also always be getting the right kind of care that you seek and desire. How, what kind of advice do you give to another young Black woman about seeking medical care? How does one go about, unless, aside from having recommendation made by friends or family members, how does one start from scratch in your mind? Trial and
so
error?
I will give a disclaimer.
Hmm.
Um, I'm still figuring it out too, but my biggest message to anyone taking their personal care seriously is make no exceptions at all. Um, if there's a problem, make sure to talk it over. Make sure to be very, very thorough um, about care. Make sure that you view your care in a long term way. Like if you're looking out for a doctor, or so I would tell myself, make sure that if you were in one of those nightmarish situations you hear about where somebody who's well educated, well off, and has it all still dies on the table from bad care. Like, if anything like that were to approach you situationally, make sure your doctor would be able to advocate for you. Make sure that you read in this person. Make sure you have a personal, real relationship with your doctor. Make sure you know who they are and their values, and make sure you can feel the care. That sounds funny, but um, I feel like you got to trust your gut and make sure that they would advocate for you if you needed it. Make sure that they would relay your voice if you were not strong enough to speak. 'Cause literally, it's those moments of being in pain, it's those moments of being uncomfortable where you're going to be weakest, and someone's got to be there to speak up for you. Um, if not your family, you got to be able to trust your doctor.
I think your advice applies to everyone, actually, regardless of race or gender.
Yes.
I, I refer my patients only to the ones I know, If my patients need another specialty, I make sure it's somebody that I would go to, especially when it comes to primary care. So the list for me is very small, but your recommendation is right on. That's the only way you can get the best care. Um, what else?
So I wanted to talk about the way gynecology was built on really the dissection and experimentation of Black American descendants who were enslaved. Um, that part of gynecology is insane to me because of the disparity. It's not something that women of that time had volunteered for. This was something put upon them. And then still, this country is at a place where we are lacking in care specifically for those that the practice was built upon. Um, it's really, really tragic. But I think that it's going to be hard to do things as grand as reparations. And I only put them in quotations like that because of the way the country is right now. Um, Easily because of the way people voted in this previous election. We are split as a country. There's people with like an older, and even older than that fashioned mindset. Um, and there's people who don't have that perspective, I guess, to think outside the box. Being so split, what we can do now is that no, we really can't, because I was going to say what we can do now is that community involvement, that community collaboration, no matter what the activity, block parties. We can't really do social gatherings because of the quarantine. Um, Darn.
You know, when it comes to any advance in healthcare or medicine, unfortunately, it's all about money. When birth control pills were first introduced in late 50s, the FDA said there weren't enough data. So this company in Western Mass, they went to Haiti, South America, places where people were not going to give or get proper consent for more data so that birth control pill containing estrogen, progesterone could be um, sold in this country. And I feel like the same thing is happening now in that I was listening to about the vaccine for coronavirus, and I'm not sure what parents would give permission to 12-year-old and under for vaccination trial unless that involve money. And I understand a lot of American companies are going overseas, third world, for human data for clinical drug trial. So the bottom line is it's all about money. So I, how we reverse this, I don't really know, other than I think I come back to individually just start with you and your family, try to get proper care. But we just have a long way to go.
It's a pretty desperate situation.
Yeah.
Um, but even in the midst of this, as Americans, we have so much, so much just from being born here, so much just from being citizens here. Um, of course, we have to appreciate what we have, but we always have to push to be greater, push to be better. Um,
That's your Nigerian heritage speaking, which is what this program is all about. Knowing that we have so much while acknowledging we have a lot of problems, but staying optimistic. And,
Exactly.
you know, for I always knew that I would have you on this episode and also bring you back to talk about additional issues. But it was very important to me that not only that I make peace with you, but I needed you to know that I'm trying. That even as old as I am trying to make sure that I'm not stuck in my way. Because at the end of the day, I'm just a solo practitioner who's trying to treat patients one at a time. And every one of you, your experience matters to me. And it's interesting, whereas pregnancy, I see patients 12, 16, or 20 times. With GYN, it's almost like one shot deal. If the experience is not positive, then patients may not come back. But it's not about whether patient is coming back to me or not. But the patient, when person comes to me, there's a reason for their visit. And I feel like it is my job to make sure that that encounter is positive. It's just that is so important to me, which is why you are important to me as a patient and this relationship outside of that. And everything you said tonight is very important, significant, and I'm hoping that we'll have a good number of listeners listening to you and do what you are promoting in that really seek better care, make sure you are heard, and make sure it's about every encounter. And during some of our conversations, you also say it's not just about encounter with a medical professional, but just living your life every day, making sure your encounter with other people is positive, right? I mean, that's important because every encounter with another human being should be a positive one. So I want to thank you so much for this time, and I'm going to make sure that you join us again. I have few friends who were thinking about doing like a panel of 4 or 5 of us and just having a discussion about this topic, how U.S. healthcare treats black women differently. It's that simple. It's you are treated differently because of your race. And data says that's just, it's a plain black and white data. It's so embarrassing. It's it's beyond words. So little by little, we do what we can and try to make positive change. Any, even though you are here as American, would love for you to hear something in Nigerian, if you can, any parting words of encouragement and hope.
I have none for today.
Okay.
Not in Nigerian languages. I am studying up on some Nigerian languages
Sure.
so that I can speak them better. Both my parents have like 7 on them and did a lot of trading in their youth. I do not have my parents' language capability,
Well, tell us in
unfortunately.
English. Tell us in English. Parting words.
Um, Parting words are thank you so much, Bill. Um, I so appreciate, especially in the isolation of this quarantine, the human connections that are real that we make. Um, this is one that's special to me. And this is one that has gone through that storming, that hard part, the road bumps, and come out to a good place. Thank you for having your patience, having the patience to talk to me about this stuff. And thank you for coming back to me and giving me a chance to reevaluate things as well. My parting words are be strong and be stern and be heard and be seen.
Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Bill.
Have a good
Thank you
night.
so much, Bill. Take care.
You know, you know, May is going to do well because she is going to be heard, she is going to be seen, and in her youthful life, she has a lot going for her. Most importantly, she's optimistic. And I have learned a lot from her during the past few weeks. And as she said, from the beginning, our doctor-patient relationship was rocky at best, but I've learned a lot, and I hope to apply what I learned from her to not only with my patients, but everyday life. Thank you for joining me tonight, and I will see you next time.